In the previous video, I repeated the motto, plan first, plant later, and you planned the number of gardens you wanted to build and the size and shape of the garden. Another important aspect is to decide which vegetables you want to plant and how many. I'm Dr. Denise DeBusk, and in this video, I'll guide you through determining how many plants go into each square, other considerations for choosing plants, timing of the crops, and companion planting. You can essentially plant a different vegetable or herb into each square to maximize on your diversity. Square foot gardening divides vegetables into 4 classes: extra large, large, medium, and small. Your planting density will depend on what class the vegetable falls into. Extra large vegetables are generally planted in only 1 per square, but sometimes plants get so large that one plant may go into 2 squares. In Florida, I typically put 1 squash plant in 4 squares. Large vegetables are planted 4 per square. Medium vegetables are planted 9 per square, and small vegetables are planted 16 per square. The easiest way for most gardeners to plan out their crops is to draw a big square with a grid of 16 squares inside to represent each square foot garden box. If you have a different size, it would be based on the square feet. For example, a 4 by 8 square foot garden would have 32 squares. Just multiply the numbers. That would mean you would put 3 lines for the width and 7 lines for the length to make the grid. It is always 1 less than the total feet. Once you have the grid, all you need to do is play with different combinations of plantings. I've included a brief table on the slide, but the Square Foot Gardening book has a more extensive list. In this example, I've used the table of spacing to create a square foot garden. From the table, you see that 1 cabbage would be planted into 1 square, while 16 radishes are in 1 square. Notice that I put how many plants go into each square. Put plants that require a lot of attention, grooming, or harvesting, such as bush beans and tomatoes, near the outside, and lower maintenance plants like radishes and carrots that you simply plant and pull in the inside. I do have my radishes on the outside here, but that is because I put shorter plants on the south end to maximize the sun. Make use of the vertical space whenever possible and plant climbing plants such as pole beans, cucumbers, squash, melons, or even tomatoes in the row of outside squares on a trellis. If you plant crops that drape, like strawberries, plant them on the outside of a row. Strawberries are more prone to fungal infections if the fruit is in contact with the soil. So by planting them on the outside, the fruit can hang over. To maximize productivity, keep in mind that you can replant the crop for a second harvest in some cases, such as with short season crops like lettuces. You may be tempted to make whole gardens out of 1 crop, but the square foot gardening method recommends that you deliberately create diversity in your garden. This will help with pest and disease control. If you want several tomato plants, it would be better to put them in separate garden beds rather than adjoining squares. You should also organize your plants within the grid so that tall plants don't overshadow the shorter ones. Vertical trellis plants and other tall plants, normally those planted in 1 square, are best placed on the northern side of the box, with intermediate plants in the center and smaller ones toward the front facing south. If you are in the southern hemisphere, it would be reversed since the north side gets the most sun exposure. Part of the determination of what goes into your squares depends on personal preference. If you don't like Brussels sprouts, then don't plant them, although they are a really cool plant to see grow. In the slide are a few examples of mixes of vegetables you can do for different purposes. For a canning garden, it would focus on the common vegetables for making pickles, sauerkraut, and other common canned goods. For an herb garden, a variety of herbs are listed. This is good if you enjoy cooking with herbs. You can dry them as well. In general, it is good to keep herbs separate since they tend to be perennial crops, meaning they can live for several years. For a salad garden, you would have different leafy greens and other salad toppings in there. For a salsa garden, you would have your peppers, tomatoes, and cilantro. This is good if you like making large batches of salsa. For gardens that have tomatoes listed, these would be better put on a trellis to conserve space. You could also have a children's garden with dwarf varieties of plants as well as unique colors of plants like rainbow carrots. Figuring how many total squares you need is one thing, but you also need to know when is the right time to plant the crops so that they are the most successful. Some crops are cool season crops and prefer to grow in cooler conditions, like broccoli, lettuce, and carrots, while others are warm season crops that have to be planted after the last freeze or they will be killed if there's a freeze, like tomatoes, summer squash, and bush beans. Most states' extension services post guides for when to plant the crops. There are also online sites that will have planting guides by USDA plant hardiness zones. The USDA hardiness zones are based on the average lowest temperatures, helping you choose plants that can survive the winter. You can often find your hardiness zone by putting in your zip code or looking at the map of the hardiness zone. The Urban Farmer's website has colorful schedules of the most common vegetables. You can see the one I have here for Zone 9. In Zone 9, I can grow more in the winter, but not as much in the summer. In cooler climates, it is reversed. You can also add companion planting by placing companion plants in the adjoining square. Companion plants are two or more plants grown near each other for the benefit of one or both of the plants. A common example is to plant basil with tomatoes. The basil repels whiteflies, aphids, and hornworms. It also repels mosquitoes. If you are a mosquito magnet like I am, then having basil around is a good thing. Some have said that it improves the taste of tomatoes. I don't know how research sound that is, but I know that the taste is improved when you cook the two together. I've posted a graphic from the Farmer's Almanac, and that site has more specific guidance on what plants help what and for what purpose. Many vegetables require that bees and other pollinators pollinate them in order to fruit. A common problem I see with squash is that it will bloom and start to make a fruit, but it will wither if it wasn't pollinated. Make sure you plant pollinator plants either inside your square foot garden or outside of it. Some examples of pollinator plants include zinnias, buckwheat, sunflowers, agastache, herbs like dill, parsley, and garlic chives, salvia, and coneflower. Keep in mind that you can also use the square foot gardening methods for growing ornamental flowers as well, including annual flowers and bulbs. So what are your next steps? You need to plan first, plant later. Draw out your garden squares and place your crops and the number of plants to plant. You can start simple with 1 or 2 garden beds with a mix of different vegetables. Check when you should plant them by checking the Urban Farmer's site, ufseeds.com, or do a search with your state extension. For example, since I'm in Florida, many of my searches include IFAS, added since University of Florida IFAS is the extension service. IFAS stands for Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. It would probably work if I put UF as well. In your plan, make sure you include pollinators. This could be in separate pots, in the ground outside of the garden, or in the square foot garden. I hope you learned more about how to plan your square foot garden and feel more comfortable doing so.